Today we're going to talk a little bit about the microscope that you should have. We're going to go through some basics on how to use it and some kind of tips to help you use it a little easier at home. So by now you should have something that looks like this. This is the recommended microscope that there's a link for it. You might have something a little different. That's fine. There's a couple ways to connect these microscopes to your device or to your computer. The easiest way for me is to just use the USB cable and plug it into a USB port in your computer and let the automatic software kind of use this as a camera. And there you should be able to open up the camera app in your computer or your device, and it should register there. It should detect it, and then you can take pictures or videos using your device, using your like laptop or your desktop computer. They also come with a dedicated app, and with that app you can download the app, and then some of these produce their own Wi-Fi, and so once you have the app downloaded on regular Wi-Fi, you disconnect that Wi-Fi and you connect to the Wi-Fi produced by your microscope, and then when you open that app, it'll connect and you'll be able to take pictures and videos through there. When you're doing that though, of course you're not connected to Wi-Fi, so just be mindful of that. However you do it, you should at some point have a way to visually see what's coming out of this microscope, the output. So once you have that situated, you're going to want to set things up so that you can see them best. And there's a couple different things that will affect this. The first thing is having like a stable way of holding the microscope. It comes with this stand, and this works great. You might want to stabilize it even further. You might want to use some rubber bands or something to go around it in order to stabilize it more so that it's not going to pop off the stand. That can like drop onto your specimen and like ruin things for a minute. And with these little microscopes, it's pretty touchy when you're working with like really small stuff. So if it like falls on there, it messes up your image for a little while. The next thing that you want is something that can be kind of the background for your microscope. And so I prefer something dark. You want something flat and something stable. This is just a book, but it's great. It's got a nice blank flat black space that I can work on. And the reason is that when you have the light on it, the black background will kind of absorb some of that light and really let you focus in on the specimen that you're looking at. In other labs, we're going to be looking at like things like pond water. When we're doing that, it would also be helpful to put that specimen of pond water on a black background. I find that's easiest. These microscopes are really similar to dissection microscopes, and a lot of you might be familiar with a dissection microscope. And basically that means that the light and the camera are all produced above the specimen plate. With something like a compound light microscope, the light is coming from below and kind of through the specimen. So for those, you need to prepare slides that are very thin and let light pass through them. But that's a little different than what we're working with these digital microscopes. These are more like a dissection scope where you're actually producing light from above. And so once you have your flat surface, you want to plug it into whatever device you're using, and then turn it on. It'll produce a light. You can vary that light intensity depending on the ambient light or the specimen itself when you're looking at it. Sometimes it helps to have it brighter, sometimes it helps to have it dimmer. Generally you'll find that the more zoomed in you are on a subject, the more light you'll want to produce to see detail. And so you have your light, you have your surface to look at stuff. The next thing you'll want to do is, while looking at the image produced by the microscope, you're going to want to identify which part of the microscope is up. That'll really help you when you're zoomed in and you want to know how to move the microscope or the specimen in order to center it on the image. And so to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is focus the image on these words. Once I see the words in the center of the image, I'm going to roll this focus knob until they become sharp in the video. Now that they're sharp, I can adjust the microscope sideways until the words become even and parallel with the bottom of the of the picture, so they're easy to read on the computer screen. Once you find that angle where the words are left to right, you can then get something small like a sticker and place that on the top of the microscope. And now you'll know that this point right here, where you put that sticker, that's the top. So then when you're looking at specimens and you see that they need to be adjusted, you'll know how to go up, down, left, and right because you have the top of the image identified. Lastly, if you're looking at something, you want to try to look at it as flat on as possible. What that means is this is a tiny little butterfly. I don't know if you can see it. This is a licantid butterfly. They're called blues. But this little butterfly, if I'm looking at it and it's at an angle with the camera, it's going to be hard to focus on anything. It'll be much easier if the butterfly is perpendicular to the camera, and that'll let the camera focus on more of the butterfly than if we're at an angle. And that's because there's a thing called depth of field. And as you look at things more closely with a lens, you also find that you can only focus on a narrower and narrower part of things that are three-dimensional. And so if you have it at an angle like this, you'll really only be able to focus on like one small part of the butterfly wing. Whereas if you had it flat, there's a good chance that you'll be able to focus on the entire surface of the butterfly wing. So in this case, I'm going to pin the butterfly down on this book, get it flat, and now, I don't know if you can see that, but I have the butterfly pinned in a way where it's flat. And now I can bring the lens in parallel to the butterfly wing, and we can see the detail there. Now, these microscopes have a couple of ways of zooming. One way is you might have a button that's plus and minus on it, and that will like digitally magnify. It'll zoom in and zoom out. So that's cool to use. But you can also zoom in and out by just bringing the camera farther and closer to the specimen. So here I'm farther away from the specimen. Let's see if I can center it. And it's really fuzzy, but I can tell I'm farther away. And once it's kind of like in a position and distance that's good, I'll then focus, and we can see I can get almost all of this butterfly in the field of view. If you were doing this on like a ruler, then you could actually measure how big the field of view is, because you could just measure the ticks of the ruler from left to right, and then that's how big the field of view is. In this case, I'm just looking at the butterfly, and I can see most of the butterfly here. So if I want to zoom in on like a compound microscope in the lab, in order to get a closer look, we would actually change the lenses. You would like flip the lens around, and then you would get a much closer view. Well, the way these digital microscopes work, you can just bring the lens closer to the surface of what you're looking at and then refocus it, and that'll give you a lot of the effect of zooming in. So in this case, I'm going to bring it closer, and now I'm going to refocus. You can see I now have a much closer image of that butterfly. Here you can see the hair that's produced on the wings. You can even see the individual scales, those little shining kind of plates. Those are the actual scales that make up the color part of the butterfly wing, and they slip off if you touch them. So if you didn't know that, here's a good opportunity to first see those scales, and we'll talk about that more in later classes. But at this point, the important thing to see and learn is that to use the digital microscope and zoom in further, all you have to do is get the object closer to the lens and then refocus. Now, you'll find if you're having to hold this with your hand, it'll be harder to do. My base is not stable. I broke my microscope and had to repair it, and it's now not the most stable base. But you'll want to have the most stable base as possible. If this base that is provided breaks, you might want to think about how to make it stronger or more sturdy so that you don't have to constantly hold it in place. Magnifying images also means your magnifying shaking. And so if you have an unstable base, you'll also have an unstable image, and then your images won't be as clear. Those are some tips on using the digital microscope. Remember, connecting with a USB, really easy to do. Put a sticker on the top that helps you kind of adjust the image that you're looking at. Try to look at things kind of perpendicular to the lens so that you can see the biggest, flattest surface possible to keep the most stuff in focus at one time. And if you have a black background, a flat black background, that's like the best for me that I've found. So if you do all those things, and then there's my stabilization attempt right here. If you do all those things, you should have the best chance at getting the clearest image on your digital microscopes.